apparently we're good to go and we're live. And so I'd like to welcome everybody to the hearing today. And we do have full quorum today. I can confirm that is the case. So I'd like to start the meeting by respectfully acknowledging that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe under the terms of the Robinson-Huron Treaty Number 61 of 1850 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. We commit to acknowledge, learn, educate, create opportunity, honor sacred places, and take actions toward real truth and reconciliation in support of our commitment to walking the path together in respect, peace, and harmony for future generations. Miigwech. So I do have a motion regarding the agenda. It has been moved by Councillor Armour and seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. It is recommended that the Planning Committee agenda dated October 12th, 2022 be hereby adopted as printed and circulated with the removal of the following. 10.1, written request from Bob Wolf, request for a full refund of rezoning fees paid for 41 Florence Street. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none. I will now go into the official part of this meeting. So once again, I'd like to welcome everyone to the public portion of the meeting to consider applications to amend zoning bylaw 2008-66P pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act. The procedure of the public meeting will be as follows. A brief explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and any correspondence received to date will be given by staff. The applicant or their representative will be asked to provide any additional comments without repeating the information already outlined by staff. Any members of the public present in person or electronically will then be permitted to ask questions or provide comments respecting these applications. Committee will then have the opportunity to question the applicant, the planner, or anyone giving presentations. Once the public meeting is concluded, the input received and proposed amendments will be considered by committee and council. Any persons making representation are requested to first state their name and mailing address. Please note that the presentations are limited to 10 minutes. Please also be informed that an appellant must provide an oral submission at the public meeting or written submission prior to the passage of the zoning bylaw. Otherwise, the Ontario Land Tribunal may dismiss the appeal. If you wish to be notified of the passage of a zoning bylaw, you must file, either with the recording secretary or with the clerk, a written request for notification prior to the passage of the proposed zoning bylaw. Each notice of complete application and public meeting included an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed amendment, and notice was required to be posted at the subject lands. Notice was therefore considered to have been provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and applicable sections of the Huntsville Official Plan. We will now deal with application number Z3025, 2022, HT and B38-40, 2022, Collins 779 Greer Road. Over to you, Kelsey.
Thank you. I'll just set up the screen. Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 779 Greer Road. The property is zoned rural and natural resource and is designated rural within the official plan. The purpose and effect of the applications is to rezone the subject land from RU1 rural and NR natural resource to conservation and rural residential to permit the creation of 3 new rural residential lots and protect the portions of the land containing natural constraint areas. Severed lot 1 would have an area of approximately, these are the conservation areas. Severed lot 1 would have an area of approximately 2 hectares and 165 meters of frontage. Severed Lot 2 would have an area of approximately 2 hectares and 232 meters of frontage. Severed Lot 3 would have an area of approximately 2.5 hectares and 140 meters of frontage, and the retained lands would have an area of approximately 3 hectares and 134 meters of frontage, all on Greer Road. Within the official plan, minimum of requirements for new rural residential lots are 2 hectares in lot area and 134 meters of road frontage on municipally maintained road, which this is. As such, the severed and retained lots meet these areas, and the proposals appear to be in keeping with the official plan. The subject lands do have some natural constraints, namely wetlands, cold water stream, and wildland fire hazard. To address these constraints, the applicant provided a scoped environmental impact assessment and a wildland fire hazard assessment prepared by Freikorp Ecological Services, both dated September 2020. The scoped environmental impact statement identified and evaluated the eco sites and the proposed development envelopes based on the delineated wetland and the appropriate buffers. Based on the presence of their natural heritage features, the report offered a set of recommendations and mitigation measures to implement to ensure the severances and future development will not impact the natural constraint areas. The recommendations are contained within the study and should be included in 5126 agreements and implemented through site plan control or the community permit bylaw should the applications be approved. The wildland fire hazard report also assessed the different tree types and site conditions in forest communities, as well as site suitability. Based on their observations, the report's author concluded that the risk for the proposed envelopes is moderate to low and will be reduced to low upon implementation of the recommendations for the Zone 1 area. Recommendations contained within the report will also be included in a 5126 and implemented through Site Plan Control or CPP should the applications be approved. There's also aggregate sites located close to the property, so a noise analysis and vibration analysis was required in accordance with the official plan. Analysis looked at the abutting pits and quarries and industrial uses, as well as traffic noise. Predictive modeling was used to assess the potential sound emissions and worst-case hourly scenarios. Based on the calculations, the sound level limits can be met with analysis without mitigation. However, a warning clause is recommended for future residents to indicate that there are these uses in proximity, which would also be implemented through a 5126 agreement. Lastly, there is a Trans-Canada pipeline corridor at the very far back of the property. The official plan states that development within 200 meters within this utility corridor may affect these services. The town required early consultation with the agency, and they provided comments and asked for certain conditions be included in agreement. The application was circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. District staff had no objection, provided that the studies outlined are implemented and that the appropriate Endangered Species Act requirements are followed. Through review and analysis, the application would appear to then conform with the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and therefore staff are recommending approval. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Kelsey. At this point, I would call upon the applicant or the applicant's representative, if they are here electronically or in person, to speak to this. Are you the applicant? Yeah, I think. That would be great, please. Thank you.
I'm Collins, the applicant.
Perfect. Oh, all right. And
Well,
you don't have to add anything. It was just your opportunity to speak.
oh, I'm sorry. I
No,
thought I
that's-
was here to be
that's-
cross-examined. but,
Not, you're not.
Okay.
You might be, absolutely, but this is your opportunity to speak to the application if you would like to, but if you feel that.
I think it's very clear, and
Okay.
Kelsey's done a very good summary of it, and hopefully it's not controversial. So away we go.
Okay, all right. Well then, thank you. And If you'd like to go back and sit, someone might be asking you a question, so we're happy you're here. Thank you. All right, with that, I would ask if there are any members of the public who would like to speak to this application, either electronically or in person.
Chair Alcock, I see no hands raised.
Okay, but we do have one person on the phone, and maybe I'll turn this over to my clerk before I say something that's not right.
Sorry, I do see we have someone on the phone, so I just want to make sure they understand because there is no raise hand button for them. If they would like to speak, they have to press *9.
All right. And we're good. Thank you very much for that, Crystal. That is very, okay. So I don't think we have any members of the public. With that, I will read the motion that is before us and ask if there are questions from committee. So it has been moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Armour. It is recommended that Planning Committee approve zoning bylaw amendment Z25-2022 HT, changing the zoning on the subject lands from a rural 1 zone to conservation zone and rural residential, with the following exception: to permit the creation of 3 new rural residential lots and protect the portion of the lands containing natural constraint areas. The lands being subject to site plan approval pursuant to Section 41 of the Planning Act 1990 RSO, as amended to implement the conclusions and recommendations contained in the Noise and Vibration Impact Assessment prepared by Cambion, dated September 22nd, 2022, and scoped environmental impact statement and wildland fire risk assessment prepared by Frycor Ecological Services, dated September 15th, 2022. No site alteration shall be permitted until a site plan agreement has been entered into with the town and registered on the title of the subject lands, and the lot area shall be deemed to comply. With that, I would ask if there are any questions from committee. Yes, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Am I allowed comments only? Chair
Yes,
Alcock?
you are allowed comments.
I would just like to say that it's very nice to see when an applicant comes and deals with planning and everything is smooth and efficient. So thank you everyone for doing what they needed to do and making the process very easy.
Right. Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. Oh, Kelsey.
Sorry, apologies, Madam Chair. I just saw when the resolution was being written, it didn't include the community planning permit within the site alteration provision. So I don't know if Richard feels like that should be added at this point.
So under the no site alteration shall be permitted until a site plan agreement has been entered into with the town? So an addition of...
Or community planning
Or
permit.
community planning permit. And I noticed we're doing that with the other applications.
Yeah, apologies, I just noticed
So
it.
is that just an amendment? Do we have to vote on the amendment? We do have to apparently vote on the amendment. Oh, I was thinking last planning we could just, just. Okay, so is it on the screen? So, do I need a mover and a seconder for that amendment?
Actually, can I just tweak the language just a little bit?
Okay.
Could you just move or community planning permit to the end of the sentence? And just add has been issued. Is that what you would say?
At the end of the first bullet?
Just after site plan approval, or sorry, just after as amended in the first bullet, if you could add.
Is it necessary?
Yeah,
As
second
amended.
one down. And should it say,
Is that,
the community planning permit bylaw?
right.
Or the community planning permit bylaw, and then take out
Has been issued. Oh, I see, right.
That one can stay the same, sorry.
right?
And then just take out bylaw on the second bullet.
Okay.
Or
The-
a community planning permit has been issued.
Okay,
Sorry.
all right. So do I have a mover? Yes, Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Armour. Do I read the whole thing with the, no. Just on the amendment. Everybody can read the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? Okay, that carries. And everyone, all in favor of thank you, the motion as amended. Thank you, that carries. Did I do that correctly? Perfect, thank you. You'd think by now I might know that. So this one, I'm just going like that because this is not the same. All right, perfect. Okay, and this is related or not related, this one? I don't know how that got in there. Okay, so, thank you. You're good. All right, we are on to application 7.2, report number development 2022-161, Z23-2022, HD Prasher Holding Inc., 1406 Highway 60. Over to you, Kelsey.
Great, thank you so much, Madam Chair, and sorry for that, getting used to all the stuff for CPP. Through you, the subject property is located at 1406 Highway 60. The property is zoned Rural 1 and is designated rural under the official plan. The applicant is proposing to rezone the subject lands from Rural 1 to Rural 1 with exception to permit a contractor's establishment and construction of a 278.959 square meter workshop associated with this use. Increase the maximum permitted accessory lot coverage from 5% to 6.6% and decrease the maximum permitted principal lot coverage from 10% to 9%. Please note there was an error in the report, recommendation and bylaw. Apologies. The proposed workshop is in fact 278.599 square meters as opposed to 82.4, resulting in 6.6 accessory lot coverage instead of 6%. The site plan was circulated to internal departments and external commenting agencies, which has the correct dimensions that they commented on. So here's a picture of the proposal. There's an existing dwelling on site, and I'm just noting here the ones where there was the error, and the workshop, and the existing dwelling. The rural designation permits low density industrial development where the adverse impacts of the surrounding uses can be minimized. The official plan requires that new rural businesses established through an amendment to the zoning bylaw will address the appropriateness of the development for the specific location, site circumstances, a proposed road access, as well as access to emergency and municipal services. In this instance, the property does not directly abut existing residential, has substantial vegetation and frontage on a provincial highway, which is an existing corridor for business and provides adequate access for the proposed business. The proposed use will primarily take place in the existing dwelling and workshop, which is set back significantly from Highway 60, leaving space for an appropriately landscaped buffer. As a result of these factors, it's not anticipated that the proposed use will adversely affect the rural character of the area. Natural constraint mapping identifies deer wintering habitat, stratum 2, on the property. A scoped environmental impact study prepared by Riverstone Solutions with an application assessed the proposed development and potential impacts on wildland habitat. The assessment provided background on the deer wintering habitat, site conditions, and impact mitigation strategies. The author of the report found that the habitat of endangered and threatened species, namely the eastern hognose snake, red-headed woodpecker, and the little brown northern meiosis, and tricolored bat. To protect this habitat, the report outlined mitigation measures and recommendations. With the mitigation measures implemented, the assessment concluded that there will be no negative impacts to the above noted habitat. The mitigation measures shall be implemented through site plan control or the community planning permit bylaw should the zoning bylaw amendment be approved. The Town of Huntsville Community Planning Permit Bylaw was passed in July 2022, but is currently under appeal and not in full force and effect. The subject lands are contained within the rural precinct with natural constraint 2 overlay. A Class 3 permit approval and technical report would be required to permit the use and coverage variation from these minimum requirements. Having regard for these provisions within the CPP bylaw, staff would also recommend approval of this application under the new bylaw. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and received no objections from the district. Through this staff review and analysis, the application would appear to conform with the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and therefore staff are recommending approval. Please note, as mentioned earlier, that an amendment will be needed to address the incorrect numbers in the recommendation. Thank you so much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that, Kelsey. I would ask, here we go. I was calling upon the applicant or their representative, and the representative is here. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. John P. Gallagher, John P. Gallagher and Associates, 24 Hibbard Road, Huntsville, P1H1C9, and I'm here representing Ravi Prasher and Prasher Holdings. As you may or may not be aware, Ravi is building a number of high-density residential units throughout Huntsville. They've just wrapped up the Highway 60 project. The building's full. The theater is moving along quickly, as well as the property out Main Street West with the foundation dug. There's also a couple more projects that Ravi's working on with me, which the Planning Committee will see in the near future. The property, and I think Kelsey has done an excellent job outlining the application. We did pre-consult with staff prior to putting in our application on this matter. As you can see on the maps, you have this one lot, and surrounded by it is one rural lot. There's no homes on that one. It's quite some distance. Across the highway is the driveway to the staff residence for the Deerhurst staff, and those buildings are substantially set back from the highway as well. The lands are designated rural in the official plan, and as such, Section 8, C8 2.5 does permit specifically the use of residential and business use of contractors, construction contractors. And this type of use is common in the rural area. The property fronts upon a year-round maintained public highway. As part of our application, we will have to do a site plan amendment. The MTO has required that land use permit, building permit, potential upgrade to the entrance permit be submitted, and we'll do that in conjunction with the site plan agreement. The property is serviced by well, water, and septic. The lot is of a sufficient size to allow for the 3,000 square foot shop. We've decreased the principal coverage to make up for the difference in that regard. And the district had stated the application generally conforms, and they had no objection to the application. It's consistent with the provincial policy statement by allowing employment opportunities and housing on an existing parcel. And we would ask committee to support staff recommendation to approve with the conditions, which are all reasonable conditions. And I'd be glad to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you for that, John. At this point, I would ask if there are any members of the public who would like to speak to this application, or electronically or by phone.
Chair Alcock, I see one hand raised, and I will now bring them into the meeting.
Perfect, thank you.
A reminder to please have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on before you begin speaking, and to confirm your name and mailing address.
We're still working out the kinks in the hybrid system. My apologies, everyone. Could we please take a 2-minute recess while this person is trying to reach us through telephone? So, 2 minutes. Perfect. Thank you. We're ready to go. So I believe we have the participant on the line. Welcome.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm not sure. This is Ann Rosalowski, 591 Evergreen Trail. I'm not sure where I give my comments during this
No,
meeting.
you know what? You're a little premature. We're on the application that is just before that one. So you'll have to wait until we get to that one.
Okay, thank you. I'll unmute, okay?
Unmute. Okay. All right. Perfect. Mute. All right. We're good to go. All right. I think now I have to remember, where am I? Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this application? I don't think we had anybody, but I'm just one more time. Okay. Oh, so I'm going to move along and ask committee. However, before I start, I think we have an amendment that you would like us to deal with before I read the main motion.
Yes, that's correct. And then also if the motion doesn't have the community planning permit. It does, okay, perfect.
It does.
Then that's addressed, thank you.
Okay, so I'll start with the amendment first before I read the main motion. Okay, all right. So I think we had it, did we not? Do I have a mover and a, yes, Mayor Terziano will move, and seconded by Councillor Armour.
It's already 82 in the motion.
It is, right? We checked that, so we don't need both?
So here's the motion.
Yeah.
It's 82.4 is wrong. And what should it be again?
So let's look at 282. So
It's 278.59, if you do the exact.
So
Yeah.
6, and it following number 278 be hereby deleted and replaced with 82.4, which we do have in there. So my apologies, I need 1 minute to sort.
That's what's on screen.
No, okay, so let's ignore what is now on the screen. We do have a motion to amend, and it has been moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Mayor Terziano. Be it resolved that the following number 6% be hereby deleted and replaced with 6.6%, and that the following number 278.59 square meters be hereby deleted and replaced with 82.4 square meters. Any questions or comments about that? No? All those in favor? Okay, that carries. And now, so this one's wrong now. So we need 1 minute to update the motion that we have before us. My apologies. Okay, my apologies to committee one more time. The amendment that you've just read, we had to switch the numbers around so that the end at the following number, I had said 278.59 is actually 82.4 square meters, be hereby deleted and replaced with 278.59 square meters. So it was reversed. Everybody good with that? Good. All right. Thank you. So that's that. Now I'm going to read the main motion as amended. It has been moved by Mayor Terziano, seconded by Councillor Stone. It is recommended that Planning Committee approve Z 23-2022 HD, changing the zoning on the subject lands from a rural 1 zone to a rural 1 with exception zone to permit a contractor's establishment as an additional permitted accessory use, permit the construction of a 278.59 square meter workshop associated with this use, increase the maximum permitted accessory lot coverage from 5% to 6.6%, decrease the maximum permitted principal lot coverage from 10% to 9%, require a minimum 6 meter wide treed vegetative buffer along Highway 60 between the workshop and road. All of the recommendations contained in the environmental impact study prepared by Riverstone Environmental Solutions, Inc., dated September 2022, being implemented through site plan control or a community planning permit, and no site alteration shall be permitted until a site plan agreement or a community planning permit has been entered into with the town and registered on the title of the subject lands. Okay, with that, are there any questions with regard? Yes, Councillor Stone.
Question and maybe a concern. There are apparently 4 camper trailers and a cabin also on this property. I'm wondering, are they inhabited? And should we add a clause saying no habitable space in the new structure? So I don't know whom.
Well, I'm going to ask Kelsey to respond to that, please.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Stone, and through you, Madam Chair. Through the site plan process, we will indicate that those all have to be removed with the new use, and that will be subject to site plan control. Also, the workshop, within our bylaw, accessory uses aren't allowed to have habitable space, so it's already within that portion. It's already defined within the bylaw that they're not allowed to. But I don't know if you wanted to further prescribe it or if you felt like that dealt with it.
Councillor Stone? So it seems that it's already, as you say, it's already contained within our existing bylaw and that they will be removed. So do you feel that that's not adequate? Would anyone? Yeah, Mayor Terziano.
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
Thanks. Just further to that, the trailers that are existing there now, are they being used as housing units, and are they in the 10% lot coverage or the 9% lot coverage or the accessory? I'm not sure what a trailer is, an accessory building or a.
Sure, I can answer that question. You're not allowed to live year-round in a trailer, and any time after typically October 1st, you physically can't because of freezing and stuff. So I don't think any of them are being used on a permanent basis. There could be some storage of the trailers on the site by employees of Ravi. But Ravi's employees, that's why he's building a lot of apartments to house them. In the existing dwelling, when the Nadrovskis had it, there was the main principal dwelling and then a secondary suite within the building, and that's what's legal from my understanding.
Okay, thank you for that. Kelsey, you'd like to add?
Yes, to clarify, we don't allow for the habitation within a trailer. For a full-time basis, storage is permitted, but I believe there's limitations to how many are stored on a property and within what setbacks. So I think we will more define that in the site plan in terms of the site plan currently shows, the physical site plan currently shows the shed to be removed, but usually we add a clause within the site plan agreement that all non-permitted structures shall be removed.
Okay, thank you for that. And Councillor Stone, is that adequate?
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine, thank you.
All right, and Mayor Terziano, the same? Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, everybody, for a little bit of a bumpy patch. Thank you. So, we are moving right along to item 7.3, which is report number development 2022-163, Z 272020 HT and B 3638-2020 HT, HLD at 600 Evergreen Trail. And Richard, you are taking the chair. Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, the subject property is located on 600 Evergreen Trail. The property has an approximate area of 37 hectares with 278 meters of linear shoreline frontage on Mary Lake. The lands are developed with 2 docks and a shed, both of which are associated with the former use of the lands as a summer camp. The lands have been maintained in a natural, well-vegetated state and have undulating topography that includes prominent hills, ridge lines, and steep slopes. Low-lying lands on the property contain wetlands. Surrounding uses are rural residential and shoreline residential in nature. The lot is designated waterfront in the town official plan and is zoned institutional camp with an exception 0660. It's also zoned rural 2, natural resource, and shoreline residential 1. Under the CPP bylaw, which is not yet in effect, but due to appeals, the lands are within the waterfront commercial with institutional camp 0660 exception zone, a waterfront backlot, and a waterfront residential precinct. as well as the flood zone. Applications respecting the subject lands were previously considered by Planning Committee at the Planning Committee meeting of November 11th, 2020. And since that time, the lands have changed ownership. The proposed development was modified to address comments, and the applications have been resubmitted for further consideration. The amended application before you is a rezoning to permit the creation of 3 new shoreline residential lots with frontage on Mary Lake, as opposed to 4, which was the proposal in the original application. The requested rezoning would change the zoning on the lands in the vicinity of the shoreline to Shoreline Residential 2, and would change the zoning on the lands containing the wetland and associated 30-meter buffer to Conservation Zone. The applicant has also made 3 concurrent consent applications, and Rural 2 zoned lands outside the Conservation Zone would not be affected. And the mapping before you shows the proposed zoning changes that are in the amended application. This mapping just shows, as a result of this application, what the zoning would be changed to. And a holding provision has been recommended by staff in relation to this rezoning to ensure that an updated environmental impact assessment is submitted to satisfactorily address steep slope, enhanced water quality, and Mary Lake character protection policies, and ensure all relevant recommendations are implemented as appropriate through site plan control or a community planning permit. This map shows the proposed new lots in red, and this is just a closer look at those new lots. As you can see in the table, the proposed lot areas and dimensions are provided, and all lots provide frontages in areas which exceed the minimum lot requirements for a new shoreline residential lot. So that is good. So I'll just say the big changes in this amended application include the elimination of the retained camp lot, the inclusion of the wetland plus its buffer in a conservation zone, and the reduction in the number of new shoreline lots proposed from 4 to 3 lots, each of which will also have a larger frontage than previously proposed. With respect to the downzoning, it's staff's opinion that a downzoning of a shoreline commercial zone property, which is normally not permitted except in extenuating circumstances, can be supported in this instance as the institutional camp lands subject to this application were surplus to the operation of the larger camp, which is Camp Minneowi, which had both a south property and a north property, and this was the north property. An extenuating circumstance affected the financial viability of the camp, leading to the sale of this land, and that's namely the COVID-19 pandemic. The feasibility of the use of the transferred camp lands is hampered by access and environmental constraints, and the larger camp's remaining land holdings will be sufficient to continue camp operations on Mary Lake with no negative impact resulting from this downzoning, despite the loss of 56 beds, which this application represents. The mapping before you shows a figure from the environmental impact assessment, and as you can see, it shows a wetland with a 30-meter buffer around it and the shoreline with a 20-meter setback along it. Not addressed, and as I've said earlier, those areas around the wetland and the wetland itself would be proposed to be in a conservation zone. Not addressed in the original EIA, which this figure is from, were policies relating to water quality, which must now be addressed given a recent blue-green algae bloom that's occurred on Mary Lake, nor policies in the official plan relating to steep slopes. This figure just shows some of the most recent mapping from the district, from their LiDAR mapping, which is a highly accurate depiction of ground elevations Orange is slopes at about 20 to 40%, and red is slopes exceeding 40% or 40%. With respect to water quality and steep slope protection policies in the Huntsville official plan, it is noted that these policies trigger a requirement for greater setbacks on the proposed lots than currently proposed in the EIA along the shoreline, and in the general development policies typically applied to shoreline residential properties. Hence, to address relevant enhanced water quality and steep slope protection policies as they relate to the current proposed development, along with the relevant Mary Lake character protection policies of the official plan, staff is requesting that the EIA submitted in support of the original application be updated to address these policies. As this information has not yet been provided, the holding provision, which I mentioned earlier, is recommended. Respecting previously noted concerns around access, which this committee may remember, it is noted that the new owners have resolved this matter and have provided legal documentation that explains the current status of the right-of-way for vehicular access over adjacent lands. Some site photos of the property. On the left, you see the location of one of the main cabins that existed on the property. You can see the foundation, and it's since been removed. And on the right, you see the areas around that. These are all photos taken from the staff report, and they show the shoreline of the proposed new lots. The photo on the top left just is a view back to the north, and it's where the wetland is located. Some existing structures along the shoreline. This is the one on the left is just a view of the original dock that continues on the property, and I believe that would be the location of the proposed dock for severed lot 2. And then on the right is the new access into these proposed new lots. Top right. And that is the end of those photos. This application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. The Mary Lake Association provided comments which highlighted concerns around the configuration of the retained lot and its future development potential. Both staff and the applicant have followed up with the Mary Lake Association to discuss their comments. I understand their concerns have been largely addressed due to the policies that are already in place to restrict waterfront backlot development. A letter was received yesterday and forwarded to this committee, which noted issues requiring clarification. Staff followed up with the commenter to provide this clarification and received no further response. No other comments were provided by the public. Comments were received from the district and are appended to the report as attachment number 8. District staff noted that they would have no objections to the approval of the development, provided that the recommendations of the submitted environmental work is implemented through appropriate development control techniques. The application appears to conform to the policies of the town official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement. Therefore, staff is recommending the application be approved, and as committee is aware of the current status of the CPP bylaw, just to note that if that bylaw was in effect, a bylaw amendment and a Class 3 variation would be required to change the precincts on the lands to a conservation precinct and a waterfront residential 2 precinct, with exceptions to permit proposed lot frontages. Having regard to the community planning permit bylaw, staff would recommend that council approve an amendment to the CPP bylaw and a Class 3 permit if that bylaw was in effect. Thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions committee may have.
Great. Thank you for that, Richard. At this point, I would call upon the applicant and/or their representative to come and speak to the application. Thank you. Welcome.
Richard Hart.
You're good
Thank
to
you.
go there. You've got.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. My name is Deborah Walker. I'm with MHBC Planning. I think you need my mailing address. Yeah, 7050 Weston Road, and it's in Toronto. And it's L4L 8G7. Okay, thank you. So I want to not take up a lot of your time. We're really essentially in agreement with the staff report. Thank you very much. I think the staff report has highlighted the amount of work that has gone into getting us to where we are today. So we have the owner, the now current owner, had worked very hard to get consensus on the access, which was a big issue previously. So that was the first thing that had to be addressed. And so we feel comfortable that that has been, as you can see in some of the correspondence, has been addressed through Lee Roach Callie's legal letter. And then secondly, the other thing that had been done is we removed one of the lots. So that also was a big part of addressing the district's concerns that was raised in the past. And also, we have removed any continuation of the CS3 zone, so the camp use would be completely, that there's not sort of this hybrid thing going on, which I don't think was ideally appropriate for the development of the lands. And in sort of lieu of that, we have put forward the zoning for the conservation lands. So it now will completely stretch across the entire property. As you can see, so it's joined with the natural resource, the current natural resource zone, and will extend for the full, as Richard has pointed out, is both the wetland that was identified in the EIS as well as the 30-meter setback, or the buffer, I should say. And the other thing that we have done that may or may not have been mentioned in the staff report is we have provided a building and septic envelopes on the proposed lots to confirm the developability, and that was confirmed as well through ground truthing with a qualified septic installer. So that was completed as well, and I believe Richard was out on the site with HLD's representative. So went through some of that detail, even though just to make sure, at least just demonstrate that the lots can be developed as they are proposed. And then finally, we have had some discussions as well with the Mary Lake Association representatives. I know that there was a piece of correspondence in the agenda package, and we had I've had a couple of great conversations with Linda Kangas, and I was able to at least pass along to her some of the constraints that are already in place. And sometimes, if you're not used to some of the background policies that are there in the official plan already, or in the zoning bylaw that we're not changing, but they're there, and sometimes that gets lost. So I tried to go through that with her in quite a bit of detail. And I won't put words in her mouth, but I do personally think that we came a long way on that, on some of her concerns. There was one thing that was sort of remaining that is recent as this morning. We've had some discussions, and it was with respect to the use of the Rural 2 lands and whether that part of the property could be severed in the future. So some comments on that. I did send to her some of the policies that would significantly constrain the ability to do that based on current policies in both the district official plan, the Town of Huntsville official plan, as well as the zoning bylaw, and the need to have frontage on a year-round publicly owned road. While that road is an unopened road allowance, so that really puts all of the control in the hands of the town for that ever to happen, because it would need to be unopened. It would have to become opened, and it would have to become a year-round public maintained road in order for that type of severance to happen. So That is certainly not contemplated. It certainly would not be permitted under the rules of today. And if if somehow miraculously that was to happen, then a severance application would come forward, and it would be also subject to a public review and a further committee and council decision, and subject to an appeal or whatever. So that's a full separate process. It's not what is proposed today at all. The final thing on that is we're not touching the zoning on that property or on that part of the property. So as you can see, I think one of the maps showed it in hatched, where the extent of the areas that we are actually amending, it does not include those lands. So that could happen today. If it was permitted, then it could happen today. We're not changing that and providing any new risk or new ability to do that. There was also some correspondence that had been, I don't know if it made it into your agenda eventually, but certainly not the first that was posted on your web page. But there was a letter from Ms. Rezalowski with concern of the access to the new lots. We have, as you may see from the severance sketch, that the yellow, I don't have it up in front of me here right now, but the yellow proposed right-of-way is actually pushing the new access road, there you go, away. So if you can see where that green line is, that's the existing right-of-way. So it would actually be allowing for even about a 10-meter buffer, give and take, from the existing right-of-way away from those properties. So we think it's an improvement. In addition to legally getting that on title, and it removes any impact on those properties with respect to the existing road allowance or road access. That's the extent of my comments, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you for that, Deborah. At this point, I will ask if there are members of the public who would like to speak to this application or make any comment. And that would be here in person or electronically. I think we do have someone definitely who wanted to speak to this electronically. So we have one member. Should we go with Pat? Are you coming forward? Sure. All right? Yes, please. Yeah. That's just the way we do things here. We like people to come forward. Thank you.
Is that on?
Okay, it's
Hi,
on
I'm
now.
Patricia Snell, and my postal code is POB1MO, and I'm the landowner for 433 Evergreen Trail. So I do have one question, and I think we were talking 4 lots.
That-
So now you're 3 lots?
No, it's 3 plus a retained, so it's 4 in total.
Right, so what's the retained?
So,
What's the purpose of the
Patricia,
retained?
may I ask?
Sorry.
I know this is, it's just a formality. We like
Okay.
it when you speak in the microphone
Oh,
because
I see, okay.
then we might not actually be able to hear you.
Okay,
So-
so I just want to clarify, and I've been working directly with Chris, so I think he would be the best one to clarify unless,
Unless,
can.
I think.
okay, so, yeah, Chris and I have worked out an arrangement, and it was 4 lots, and lot number 1, which is now over there, but we were calling it the first lot, had the retained lands attached to it. So can you just go through that for me?
That would be great. I think Richard will do that.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Great question. So through you, Madam Chair, just on the screen, you'll see the zoomed-in version of the consent sketch. So this is the sketch showing what the proposed new lot configuration would be. And you can see that there's a green area shown, and if I zoom out, the green area is the retained lot, and it covers the majority of the lands. And then there are 3 lots shown in red. So those are the severed lots. So those are 3 new shoreline residential lots, and then the larger retained parcel.
Okay, so the larger retained parcel is the large lot. So technically, 4 residences can be built, 1 on each lot, including the large retained lot, which is at the beginning of the development, potential development.
Yeah.
that-
So through you, Madam Chair, that is entirely correct, and that's why the rezoning changes the zoning on the retained lot to shoreline residential to also permit a cottage or a dwelling on that portion of the lands too.
Okay. That's it? Great, thank you for,
And that answers your question?
that does?
Okay?
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Very straightforward, that's great. Is there anyone else present here? I'm not seeing any, so if we could ask the caller to join us, that would be great.
As a reminder to members of the public who are present electronically, please use the raise hand button or press *9 to indicate you would like to address committee. Chair Alcock, I see 3 hands raised, and I will now bring the first one into the meeting.
Thank you.
A reminder to please ensure that you have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on, and confirm your full name and mailing address before beginning your comments.
Hello, this is Ann Rosalowski, 591 Evergreen Trail, Utterson, Ontario, P0B1M0. I reside at 591 Evergreen Trail, Part 4 on your sketch. I would just like further clarification on the current Evergreen Trail Road, whether that will be closed and access will only be by the new road yet to be constructed.
Okay, thank you for that. And I believe our manager of planning is going to jump in. Richard?
Sure, I can start an answer, and if I get anything wrong, then maybe
I'll turn to.
Chris can,
Yeah.
or Deb can highlight it. So, thank you, good question, through you, Madam Chair. It's my understanding that nothing would impact the existing path that Evergreen Trail takes beyond this new driveway. So this is going to be a new lane to service these, the retained lot and the 3 lots that are being created, and that's it. And the existing Evergreen Trail would remain untouched.
Does that answer your question, Ann?
So, no, it does not. So I live on Part 4. So are we going to be closing the current access that was the access for Camp Minneowi, which is lot number 1, can no longer access the current Evergreen Trail, and we need to access the new road yet to be constructed?
Richard?
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. No, there would be no impact on the existing Evergreen Trail.
So there won't be.
Richard, you still have not answered. You've still not answered the question.
Okay, what part of the question? So I understand. Sorry?
Is the road going to be closed next to Part 8?
Okay, Chris, could you please come forward?
Who's
Chris, we've just been joined by Chris House.
So to answer your question, the road will remain open, but it'll only remain open for yourself and your immediate neighbor past you. That's where the road will dead end, and you both will be conveyed easement over that. But nobody beyond you will have the right to use that road. They will use the newly created road that's cut through the bush with the setback. So there will be no traffic into the new site will go by your house.
Does that answer your question?
So
Ann?
is the plan, yes, Chris, is the plan then, how would you close that road?
Well, I
And when
can't
would
close
this
it or
happen?
you wouldn't have
Prior
access
to
to your house.
So,
No, I'm
Andy,
talking about where the gates are now.
It would just dead end and we would plant a berm across there.
Okay, Anne?
So getting also, second question is, there are two rights of way along Evergreen Trail, the original rights of way and the rights of way between Part 4 and Part 8. Has that been addressed in this, either in the notice of application or the consent application? Because I was not involved in that process.
Just so you know, we have two people looking at the plan right now. Are you
Okay.
confused by the question?
No,
No,
I
okay,
believe
sorry.
I understand the question,
perfect,
but I
thank
think
you.
it's the same answer. So through you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
There would be no change on the easements or rights of way in favor of any of those landowners.
Okay.
What's been clarified is that across 433 Evergreen Trail, 433 Evergreen Trail, that a right-of-way has been granted in favor of the retained lot, the 600 Evergreen Trail, and then through this application, existing or additional rights of ways will be granted to the proposed new lots. So that is what's being proposed, and no change to the existing rights for anyone else on Evergreen Trail.
Okay, that's excellent, thank you. And that should answer that question?
Yes, it does. And will that be included in the minutes?
That will be included in the minutes.
Okay, thank you. That's
Okay,
it for
thank
me.
you, thank you for your participation and your questions.
Okay.
All right, I think we can move to, we have another person? I think we had three.
I will now bring in the next speaker. A reminder to please ensure that you have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on, and confirm your full name and mailing address before beginning your comments.
Yes, hello. My name's Linda Kangas. My address is 230 Edgemere Road East, Port Sydney, P0B1L0. So I'm representing the Mary Lake Association. I just, for completeness, want to add some commentary here. So the concern that the Lake Association raised, and I documented it in our email, which you have in the package, centers around the retained lot. That lot is extra large, and so we were concerned about the potential for a number of dwellings to be built on that lot with some kind of a shared access to the shoreline. That was our concern in a nutshell. And, you know, we have been assured by Deborah that that type of arrangement is not being contemplated here. And I've also been advised by Richard that if this application is approved today, that type of arrangement would not be allowed. Like, in other words, approving this application would not permit that to happen. So with those two conversations and our new understanding, I would say our concern has been addressed.
Okay, I appreciate your commenting on that today. They were both important issues, and it's nice to get that feedback, having had those conversations. So thank you for that. All right, I believe we have one more participant.
I will now bring in the next speaker. A reminder to please ensure that you have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on, and confirm your full name and mailing address before beginning your comments.
Hello, my name is Roger Rossi. I'm at 619 Evergreen Trail, postal code BOB1M0. And this might seem repetitive, but the way it's presented is a little confusing. We talk about 3 lots, but yet I think the clarification is that there's 4 lots, that the retained lot, and I just want to make sure that I understand, is the intent to sell the retained lot as a property that would have a single dwelling on it, and the restrictions are clear that that's the only way that can be used? I know we've talked around it, but I'm not sure, or people have said they've got clarification. Is that absolutely clear then? So the intent is to sell 4 lots. There'll be 4 homes on those properties, with the retained lot being one of those?
I appreciate that question for sure, and I notice our Richard is nodding, so I think I'm going to turn that over to you.
Sure, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. That is the intent. And the reason we keep saying 3 new lots is because the previous proposal was 4 shoreline residential lots, and it's now been reduced to 3 new shoreline residential lots. Of course, when you take into consideration that the retained lot can also be built on, that means that there could be 4 new cottages. So, and that is the intent, that it would be sold and 1 cottage would be built, or shoreline residential dwelling unit would be built on the retained lands. You can only have 1 dwelling unit on a property, so any change to that would require a amendment or a planning application to sever off an additional lot. So that's not what's being proposed here. And as Ms. Walker already went through, there are restrictions in place in our official plan that would prohibit development of a back lot in this instance, because it wouldn't be serviced by a year-round public road. So there would be no possibility of creating a back lot in this instance. So I hope that makes it clear to you.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. And that satisfies your question?
It does.
Okay. Terrific. Thank you. Anything else? Was that your fundamental? Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much for participating today. Appreciate it. Okay. So, did we have someone who was phoning in, or was that? That was the first one. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. I don't see one more. In relation to this application? We're dealing with this application, so absolutely come forward. Maxine, if it's related to this application specifically.
Good afternoon. Madam Chair, Council, members, my name is Maxine Bastido. My address is 872 Williamsport Road, Huntsville, Ontario, P1H 2J4. And my comments are 2 or 3. I, in advance of this meeting, asked to be on the agenda to speak to particularly aspects of this, and I was told that I was denied, that I needed to give
Maxine, I'll interrupt only there because I understand you had, but you actually didn't allow enough time. If you're asking to make a deputation, you actually have to, I think it's at least 4 hours before the meeting at the very minimum. And that's for something that is on the agenda.
And
so that should explain why.
No, I'm saying that I'm referring to the agenda items, and I was given the impression that I would not be allowed to speak. Therefore, I came to listen, and then when I was here, I realized there were opportunities to speak. But I didn't have, may I finish? I didn't have material with me, so I had to go to my car to receive some. And then as I was given that information, I hadn't prepared sufficiently to actually speak, so that the first item was well on its way or gone before I was able to join. So I'm saying I'm concerned about misinformation.
Okay.
Number 2, I'm concerned with the CPP in the sense that, to me, I would speak because it's in several of these, including that I understand it's under appeal. I have
Maxime, I am going to interrupt because what is before us is not in direct relation to the CPP. And so I know that there's a reference to it, but that's not the issue that's before us right now. So we're not here to talk about the fundamentals of the CPP.
I think during an election period, meaning that there are restrictions with that, given the scope and the process and the significance of CPP, I
Yes.
think that consideration needs to be given to that, because it isn't just the appeals, there's also those aspects.
And I appreciate that.
Yes.
But not in this forum today, because all of these people have come to talk about very specific applications.
I understand, but with this in these applications, I think it's somewhat misleading
Okay?
under the
Comments-
circumstances.
Your comments are noted.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then I think further, there's just the fact of that overall, and this some was specific to, but that has been, the process has gone as it has without opportunity for me, that there are aspects particularly of the rural lands and developments and the way that is going and the way that may go if the CPP proceeds as it seems to be.
And I appreciate that. Okay.
And then
Thank you.
specifically, it would have been, especially with the first one regarding the species at risk, but I won't get into that at this time. I thank you. I do not like the fact that there was opportunity that I wasn't made aware of until after I attended.
Okay.
Good luck.
Your
Thank you
comments are
very much.
duly noted. Thank you, Maxine. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak to this application? I don't see any. So with that, I am going to read the first of two motions. I have a motion moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Mayor Terziano. It is recommended that Planning Committee approve zoning bylaw amendment Z27-2020 HT, changing the zoning on subject lands from an institutional camp with exception 0660 zone, a shoreline residential 1 zone, and a rural 2 zone to a conservation zone, and a shoreline residential 2 holding zone to protect natural constraints on the lands and facilitate the creation of 3 new shoreline residential lots, and that the holding provision may be removed and development may proceed upon the Director of Development Services being satisfied that the following has been completed. An updated EIA has been submitted to the satisfaction of the Town of Huntsville to address steep slopes, enhanced water quality protection, and Mary Lake character protection policies, and a site plan agreement has been entered into, or a community planning permit has been issued to implement all relevant recommendations as appropriate. So with that, okay, apparently there was an individual who raised their hand as I was reading. Would the committee be okay if we go to that individual because they did raise their hand? All right. Let's go to that individual. Thank you again. Hybrid meetings, we're all learning.
A reminder to please ensure that you have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on, and confirm your full name and mailing address before beginning your comments.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, and we can see you.
Hi. Thank you very much for taking my call last minute. My name is Ken Rubin. My address is number 12 Parkhurst Boulevard, Toronto. And my postal code is Mary 4 George 2 Charlie 5. My family has a cottage directly across from Lawrence Island. It's a big property, I guess, to the right of the 3 lots that are being developed. And I just had a question with respect to the setbacks. I think I recall you mentioning that it's a 20-meter setback for the properties from the water line. I'm just wondering how it's measured, if it's measured kind of horizontal from the edge of the property to the edge of the structure that's being built, or if it runs kind of along the land, kind of up the hill in such a manner. Just kind of did a diagram there, not sure if you can see it or not.
We can see it. Thank you for that, Ken. Terrific. Terrific. All right, so that's a straightforward question, and I'm going to ask Richard.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, it is bird's eye view what the distance would be from the shoreline frontage. So not taking into consideration topography.
Great. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Kim. All right. All right, with that, I will now ask committee if there are questions or comments. Okay, I think you're exhausted, isn't it? Exhausted with all right, no questions or comments, then I will call the question. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. And I do have another motion moved by Councillor Armour, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. It is recommended that the Director of Development Services approve consent application B36 2020 HT, B37 2020 HT, and B38 2020 HT for the creation of 3 new shoreline residential lots and for the establishment of rights of way for access conditional on 1, a registrable description of the severed lot being submitted to the clerk along with a registered copy of the reference plan, 2, the owner's taxes being in good standing, 3, a site inspection fee of $245 being paid to the town of Huntsville, 4, a consent finalization fee in the amount of $190 being paid to the town of Huntsville, 5% cash in lieu of parkland being paid to the town of Huntsville on the severed lands, 6, the lands being rezoned for their intended use. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that carries. Okay, and that is the end of that application. No other motions? All right, thank you, everybody, for your participation today and your patience. So, I'm going to, it's sticky. I know. Now that all comments have been received, I declare these public meetings respecting the above applications to be concluded. We will now move to the non-public portion of the meeting. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Richard, for SPA 115, 2022, HT 1961917, Ontario, Inc. And with respect to 6977 and 81 Centre Street North.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, the subject property, as you just noted, are located at 69, 77, and 81 Centre Street North. This application is to authorize site layout to facilitate a development on lands which committee considered previously in March 2022 through zoning bylaw amendment application Z4 2022 HDE. The zoning on the lands was changed to Centre Street mixed use with holding and exception 0505 as a result of that planning process. As before, the application is for a 1,004 meter square addition to the existing 721 meter motor vehicle dealership, along with a reconfigured parking area and vehicle display area. The applicant intends to work with the town to discuss the provision of adequate pedestrian infrastructure in the vicinity of the lots where necessary. And as committee will recall, there's a holding provision applicable to the lands which requires this item be addressed prior to development proceeding. The proposed development appears to comply with the site-specific zoning provisions. However, some minor changes may be needed to the plans to address specific landscaping measures, such as a 1.8 meter high privacy fence, moving snow storage areas away from a forested ravine, adding buffer plantings along that feature and along areas abutting residential lands, and addressing light trespass associated with light fixtures at the rear of the building, and including a fire access route. Plans may also need minor changes to address comments emerging from the final engineering review that is still pending. You may recall the elevations have not changed, and you can see the addition on the right of the top image. These are some 3D views. Again, these have not changed, and on the one on top, you can see the existing building in blue and the proposed addition to the right. Some additional views of what it would look like. And this is the landscape plan as currently proposed. Some site photos to show what it looks like this time in the summer. If you recall, it was snowy conditions last time. And I recall because it was very cold when I took them. The application appears to conform with the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and staff are recommending approval of the site plan application, subject to conditions to address outstanding matters noted in the report, and any requested revisions from the relevant review agencies. Committee is aware of the status of the community planning permit bylaw. The subject lands are contained within an urban mixed-use precinct in the CPP bylaw, which applies along mixed-use corridors within the Huntsville settlement area and permits a broad range of residential and employment uses. As the expansion of the motor vehicle dealership was considered and approved by council through passage of Bylaw 2022-33, the proposed development would be considered through a Class 1 permit approval, as it's already been approved through that process. Having regard to the provisions of the CPP bylaw, if this bylaw was in effect, staff would be recommending approval of the Class 1 permit conditional on all the same conditions that we're suggesting in relation to this site plan. Thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that committee may have.
Thank you for that, Richard. I would ask if the applicant or their representative would like to speak to this application, and here we have. Thank
Good afternoon. Thank you, John P. Gallagher, John P. Gallagher and Associates, 24 Hibbard Road, Huntsville, P1H1C9, here on behalf of the Festings and Festing Toyota. First, I'd like to send out some appreciation to staff for getting this on the agenda. I understand that there could be some meetings canceled, and the Festings are eager to proceed with their plans to expand the building. 2 buildings will be coming down as part of this application. We've tried to identify a significant amount of trees along the streetscape, along Center and West. I believe we have some commitments with respect to sidewalks that we made on the West Road. And the comments coming in, we definitely can work with staff to resolve those minor issues as they come in. It could be something as simple as, in this situation, they mislabeled the fence at 1.5 meters when it should be 1.8, and other items. So I'd be glad to answer any questions should you have any. Like I said, we're thankful for staff for getting us on the agenda, and thanks, Richard.
Thank you for that, John. I do have a motion. It has been moved by Mayor Terziano, seconded by Councillor Stone. It is recommended that the Director of Development Services approve site plan application SPA 115-2022 HT, and that the agreement be prepared to the satisfaction of the town, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign any necessary documentation, conditional on all final plans and drawings being to the satisfaction of the town and all other commenting agencies, the subject lands being merged on title. So with that, I would ask if there are any questions, comments. I just want to say I think it's very exciting. I wish them well in that if it passes. No other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, John. Okay, moving right along to our next item, SPA 89-2022, All Ontario Recycling 225 Muskoka Road 10.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, as you've just noted, the subject property is at 225 Muskoka Road 10. The subject lands are approximately 36 hectares in area with 123 meters of frontage on Muskoka Road 10. The lands currently contain several buildings located in the northwestern portion of the property that are associated with a metal recycling and salvage yard use, along with a single detached dwelling at the northeast portion of the property along Muskoka Road 10. The southern and central areas of the property are vacant forest lands. Outside these areas, lands have been cleared for parking and outdoor equipment and material storage associated with the operation. Surrounding uses include rural residential, highway commercial, and resource extractive uses. And of course, there's an elementary school to the west, a golf course to the east, and a quarry to the north. The front portion of the lands containing the single detached residential dwelling is designated community residential, while the remainder of the lands is designated restricted rural. The lands around the buildings are zoned heavy industrial, while the remainder of the remainder is zoned rural 1. The current use is permitted within the heavy industrial zone on the lands and has been determined to be a legal non-conforming use within the rural 1 zone. It should be noted that in order for a use to be a legal non-conforming use under the Planning Act, the use must not change and must continue on the lands. An expansion of a lawful use or discontinuation of a use would both need to be considered in determining whether or not a current non-conforming use is lawful in relation to the zoning bylaw. It should also be noted that the town's zoning bylaw permits legal non-conforming uses to continue, provided there's no change in the use. This application is to authorize site layout to facilitate development on lands which include the construction of a new 1,471 square meter building to permit the continuation of the existing uses within this building. In addition, the proposal consolidates separate buildings into this one, and this new building will allow many of the operations that are currently occurring outdoors to be moved indoors. Given the proximity of the proposed development to an existing operating non-municipal waste disposal site, a D4 assessment was submitted in support of this application. And according to this assessment, the site is identified as a stump dump measuring approximately 3,000 meters squared in area, situated east of the proposed development and on the north side of the road, Muskoka Road 10. Based on the assessment, the new industrial building would be considered compatible development with this dump dump. A municipal drinking water supply well, known as the Clark Crescent Municipal Supply Well, is located in the vicinity of the proposed development, and a source water protection policy review was submitted in support of this application to address OP policies related to such wells. Of note in this study was the author's observation that the Clark Crescent Municipal Supply Well is assumed to be a GUDI well, and that's a well that's completed in groundwater under direct influence, so GUDI, of surface water. Such wells are generally considered to be more susceptible to contamination and should have their vulnerable areas mapped in accordance with provincial rules similar to those that apply to surface water intake protection zones. In this instance, the associated vulnerable area appears not to have been mapped for the surface water features assumed to influence the well, and in consideration of this and the fact that operations appear to exist or have expanded into lands within the vicinity of a feature mapped as a cold water stream, staff has requested site remediation in areas abutting the surface water feature on the eastern boundary of the site. According to sections D7.1.1 of the official plan, which includes policies relating to land use compatibility, uses that contribute noxious effluent, noise, emissions, or vibrations, or pose a danger will not be permitted unless satisfactory mitigation measures are provided. In this instance, respecting noise, it's noted that an acoustic impact assessment was prepared for the subject lands. The report included analysis of noise generated from the current facility and measurements taken at several different receptor locations. Generally, it was indicated that the facility met maximum noise guidelines. Staff has recommended that this report be used to establish required setbacks and other noise mitigation measures as part of the current proposed site redevelopment. It's noted that many mitigation measures have already been implemented on site, including but not limited to the installation of berms to control noise along the eastern property boundary, relocation and replacement of crusher machinery on site, such that the new crusher is both further away from surrounding residential uses and operates quieter, and retention of generous treed buffers around the salvage yard. In addition to these measures, which will remain in place, the new building will also allow many outdoor storage bins to be moved indoors and is designed to permit drive-through loading to reduce noise from truck backup alarms, which will further reduce noise output from the site. Respecting effluent from salvage operations, it's noted that the owners currently handle and store all fluids on site in accordance with applicable standards and legislation. The applicant intends to work with the town to establish suitable revegetation areas within the general areas staff has flagged to date, particularly along the watercourse feature. Further, as the legal nonconforming use within the rural zone appears to have expanded over time and staff is requesting these areas of expansion should be revegetated or left to regenerate naturally, the applicant has agreed to review these areas with the town, and where this can be discontinued, these areas will be maintained in a natural vegetated state. Just on your screen, you see some of the plans submitted as part of this site plan application, and this is the stormwater management plan. The previous drawing just shows what this building would look like, as it's a 3D sketch. And here are some photos showing the existing conditions on site. These two buildings, both left and right, would be removed and replaced by the new building. On the left, you see their current scales, which would continue. And these are some photos of the salvage yard. And on the bottom left is where you see the area where the watercourse is located that we want to work with the applicant on revegetation. On the right is the actual location of the creek. These photos just show the existing conditions on the left where you have outdoor storage in large bins, and on the right you see the new bins that would go indoors and allow all the outdoor bins to be replaced. On the left you see the new location for the crusher, and on the right you see the Quonset hut where all fluids are drained from vehicles and stored appropriately. The application appears to conform with the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and staff are recommending approval of the site plan application subject to conditions to address outstanding matters noted in the report and any requested revisions from the relevant review agencies. As you know, the community planning permit is not in effect. However, the subject lands are contained within the heavy employment precinct in the CPP bylaw, which applies to heavy employment areas within settlement areas. As the proposed development will not expand the use on the property beyond what is already existing and will consolidate elements of this use by demolishing several existing structures and some outdoor operation areas into one new industrial building, the proposed development could be considered through a Class 1 permit approval. Having regard to the provisions of the CPP bylaw, if this bylaw was in effect, staff would recommend approval of the Class 1 permit, conditional on all final plans and drawings being prepared to the satisfaction of the town. Thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Richard. At this point, I would call upon the applicant and/or their representative if they'd like to speak to this application. Welcome, Savas.
Good afternoon, Savas Raz, Plan Muskoka, P.O. Box 5384, Huntsville, Ontario, P1H2K7. I'm here representing All Ontario Recycling as their agent on this matter. don't really have a lot to add. I think the technical matters have sort of been explained in pretty good detail in the staff report and presentation made by Richard. I appreciate the recommendation for approval. I want to just reiterate one thing. I think that what this is doing is consolidating a lot of the outstanding sort of buildings that are around this property. A lot of those, if anybody who's been in there knows that they've just really don't have the space to operate, you know, effectively in the current infrastructure on the site. And what this will do is provide a central building that all these outstanding uses will be consolidated into. And particularly, I think of the most improvement would be a lot of the outdoor uses. There's a lot of I guess processing that occurs in an outdoor that will be able to occur indoors now in this new building. And I think that'll seek to just further improve any noise emissions that come from the site, further to any mitigation measures they've already implemented on site. I think it'll just simply just, you know, overall improve the site, both functionally and from in terms of the impact that it has on the surroundings. As Richard's mentioned, the applicants are willing to work with staff to seek to revegetate portions of the site that appear reasonably needed particularly in terms of the cold water stream that is located to the southeast portion of the property. If it's deemed that the yard has extended into the required buffer area for that feature, then the applicants have no problem revegetating those portions of the property, particularly along the eastern side as well too, where you know, the expansion has occurred and has encroached closer to that side lot line. So other than that, I think, like I said, I feel an improvement to this site. It falls within an area that this is a permitted use, and there's no variances were required to do so. It just simply was consolidating existing buildings on the site. So that really is the simple thing about this application. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you for that, Savas. So I will read the motion. It has been moved by Mayor Terziano, seconded by Councillor Wiebe. It is recommended that the Director of Development Services approve site plan application SPA 89 2022 HT, and that the agreement be prepared to the satisfaction of the town, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign any necessary documentation conditional on all final plans and drawings being to the satisfaction of the town and all other commenting agencies. Are there any questions from committee? Yes, Mayor Terziano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Richard, you highlighted 2 buildings that were to be demolished, but when I look in the overhead mapping, there looks like there's at least 6 structures. Is there any way to narrow down what's going and what's remaining?
Thank you. It's a good question. Through you, Madam Chair. I can try my best, and I know Savas might be able to assist, but if I can just show my slides again.
Mm-hmm. That would be helpful, just to show.
So I'm just going to pull up the overall site plan, which would show what the development would be after build out. And maybe while we're waiting, really what I'm seeing on my plan, and you'll see shortly, there's a red outline that shows the existing structures that are going to be removed. And I don't know if I could zoom in.
That would be helpful. It's not very, it's pretty small. Oh, that would be good.
Oh, here, editing the, it doesn't look like I can.
So maybe, can you see it on your screen, Your Worship? So maybe if you just point out.
Oh, wait a second.
There we go. Okay, excellent. Thanks.
So yeah, you can see the red outline of the existing structures that are going to be removed. So if you remember the photos I was showing, there was a garage that's this, it's going to be removed. This is a office building, and it's going to be removed. The scales are shown here, and the trailer office, or the trailer associated with the scales, will remain. The Quonset hut, which I described as being where they drain fluids, will remain, and the residential dwelling at the front of the property will remain. Everything else would be, as you see here, in gray, the new building.
So, sorry, if I might just follow up. So while you have that diagram up, can you highlight where the crushers, I mean, I know over the years we've had, numerous complaints about noise from the area, and I'm just wondering if the new structure is going to be in close proximity to where the noise complaints might come from, or whether it's going to be set back. And I guess secondly, is the crusher itself, which I'm assuming might be a lot of the noise issues, is it being moved or relocated?
Yeah, so again, I can try, and I know Savis and his client are here if any clarification is needed. But previously, from when the noise complaints, I think, were originally dealt with, the crusher was located somewhere where my cursor is, on the eastern boundary of the property in the front. And of course, there are some residential, there's some residences on Clark's Lane, just to the east. The crusher, a berm was constructed in that location between those residences and the crusher when those noise complaints were originally received. And then since that time, that crusher has been retired, and a new crusher was purchased, which, according to Steve from All Ontario Recycling, is a much more efficient crusher, so less noise. And then it's also been relocated to almost where my cursor's located here. So farther away from those residences.
Thank you for that, Your Worship.
No, just a comment. Thank you, and thank you to the applicant for making the improvements. It's great.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, all right. Thank you for that. I will call the question. All those in favor? And that is a wrap. Thank you for that, and thank you for being here for that. All right, so we don't have any previous business, we don't have any new business. And before I go to the final motion, which is to adjourn, I just want to say this is our last planning committee meeting, and probably last planning committee, given the new CPP. And from my perspective, I know everything will change after October 24th. And so I want to thank everybody, all staff, for supporting this committee throughout the whole time that I've been here. Couldn't have done it without any one of you, frankly. And just from my perspective, I want to say what a pleasure it has been for me to have worked with everybody around this table. And so that's it. Anyone else who might want to say anything? No? All right, Councillor Armour?
Without us around the table, you never have quorums.
That's true. Thank you, and thank you for that. That's good. Thank you for bringing me back to reality. I was getting all emotional. That's so good. All right, with that, I have a motion moved by Mayor Terziano, and I don't have a seconder on this. Okay, Councillor Stone. I do have that. It is recommended that we do hereby adjourn at 2:49 p.m. All those in favor? And that carries.